Hey guys, I just wanted to record a quick video. This is just my initial impression here. I just received some of the these are the box V2 switches from Kailh. And for these, there's a lot of differences between the V1 switches, which I also have here for the respective white and brown. And I also have this one of the Chinese box series, the Glaze Green, that I'll also be talking about here. One of the main things that has changed on these V2 switches is if you're using cherry profile keycaps and you have your keycap with north-facing PCBs, you might be familiar with a lot of times there's interference and it will actually have your switch hit the housing. So on the V2s, same thing, north-facing, right? If we put our keycap on, we're going to see that there is, let me line it up here, no interference on it. So if I could slide it in, no interference on this. So it's a nice upgrade for people who might have a north-facing PCB and like cherry keycaps. So another issue with the Kailh, their first batch of box switches was that the little kind of tabs that they have over here were so thick that they were cracking keycaps. It does seem here like they are smaller, and that might just be me over analyzing it, but it does look like the nibs are even smaller than they were before. In terms of putting the keycap on and off, now mind you, these have already been on the original box switches. It still holds it well, comes off pretty easily. I would say that the old version definitely holds it tighter. I'm having a lot more resistance pulling this off. A significant amount of resistance pulling it off. So another benefit for anyone who was kind of initially afraid of the first batch of the boxes cracking keycaps, it seems like the nubs are definitely smaller and are even more unlikely to damage keycaps now. So you can probably use those and rest easy, even with GMK sets here. The box browns, I believe these are actually the most significant upgrade in terms of what Kailh has done with the V2 switch. Now, allegedly, this is significantly more tactile than the original brown, and even with a simple test of just pushing them together, even without force curves or anything like this, look at the huge difference in tactility. The box V2 brown is not even moving when I start applying pressure here. It's only when you really start pushing do you see the difference. So there's the much larger, a huge tactile bump compared to the original brown, which is barely tactile here. Now, in terms of overall weight, it doesn't really feel a lot heavier just on initial key press, but it must be a lot more progressively loaded here because we could see just huge difference. Now, I won't say it's as extreme as like a Holy Panda, or I think I have some Zelios around here I could probably compare it to. Give me a sec. Now, mind you, the Zelios isn't, I would not say it's the most tactile switch, but it is a more tactile than I think you would compare to a box brown. And let's see how those go. Wow, it's even more tactile than a Zelios, which is pretty impressive as well. So not quite as tactile as like a Holy Panda. Unfortunately, I don't have any of those on hand at the moment, or a Glorious Panda. So I'm going to go ahead and open some of these up and take a look at the internals and see what's changed there as well. I'm going to start with the browns here. So go ahead and open this up. Luckily, I have a Kailh switch opener on hand here. We'll open up the V2. So the housing is definitely lubed, and you can tell here. This you can see the V1. Let's see if we get it to focus. The V1 all right, and then we're gonna look at the V2. And you could, I don't know if this is coming up on camera, but you could tell that the nub here is actually lubed, and you could kind of get a little bit of the lube in there. You can see that it's been lubed, which is interesting. So it looks like these are factory lubed. Let's see if they're anything crazy. Like the bottom of the housing is a little bit lubed. I don't know how well it shows up here with the black, but that bottom, yeah, you could definitely see it here. You could see the lube around it, whereas the V1 is not. Other than that, the housings look very similar. I'm not sure if, I believe it's a new material that's being used for them. I'll probably try and pull up a spec seat here. This one we can also see is a 5-prong versus a 3. The springs are the biggest difference here. Just look at the difference in the spring length. A huge difference. Alright, in terms of the top housing, let's see here. Get a little bit closer. Now, you can also see, there's a little bit of lube, just a speck there you could see on the bottom of the stem. The V1 does not have that. Let's go ahead and take the stems out here. Alright, so we've got V1, V2. Yeah, V2 definitely has the legs of the stem lubed. I can feel it on my fingers here. So overall the shape looks very similar. You could probably catch a little bit of the lube over there. Yeah, you can see they're lightly lubed. It's not a crazy amount of lube. They don't feel over lubed. I don't think I would be able to find a reason to relube these. If anything, you might add a little bit more because the rails aren't like super lubed on this. And on this side, you can see it barely looks lubed at all. But for, less is more sometimes, so it might actually not be a huge deal. In terms of the stem, you can kind of see the shape has changed on these. And I would say the shape is much rounder than it was before. The V1 is a lot more, very angular in terms of the way that it is set up. Whereas the new one is a bit more curved. Lastly, for the top housing, it does look very similar. I mean, the colors, well, I do see some differences here. So the V2, it does have holes for through-hole LEDs, whereas the V1 just supports, looks like SMD. So that could be a benefit if you do have a through-hole mounted board. Again, we already talked about the interference, that you don't have to worry about interference whether your PCB is north facing or south facing. The rails look just about the same. Yep, the rails look pretty much the same. In terms of lube on them, definitely not over lubed. Like you could tell, they just very lightly lubed everything on this switch. It's not overdone. So if you're not crazy about lubing, which more people I think are now than before, there's definitely not a lot of worry about these switches coming over lubed. And I could open some more of them too, and I'll comment if any of them are over lubed or under lubed relatively to the rest. So let me go ahead. I'm going to put these together. Somewhat ironically, while opening the box brown switches and reassembling them, I actually lost the leaf part, and I only have one of them on a switch tester, because honestly, who would want Kailh box brown V1s? So I also have the box whites over here. I'm going to go ahead and pop these open as well. Here, we're really just going to be looking at the click bar itself, or like getting a better idea for if the click bar has any changes on it. So I also popped open the box white as well. So for this one, the bases are pretty much exactly the same. Now, one of the things I did notice, as I said, these are lubed. And again, I'm not sure how well this is going to show up here with my lighting, but the V1 bottom housing here, no lube. The V2, and let me see if I hit the light here so you can kind of catch it. You might see it here. Let's see. Okay, you could kind of see it here, right by the stem. That's actually lube, and there's a very significant amount of it on the bottom housing here. We're gonna try and get this an angle where you could see it, but all right, you might see it there. You see the big globs, kind of versus the camera. You're gonna see it's the top and bottommost part of this. Those are just big globs of lube there. I don't think this is gonna negatively affect the typing experience. It's definitely going to help with spring ping, but it's not really distributed on the bottom housing, so I don't think that's too much of an issue. Especially with a clicky switch, I don't think you're going to notice it too much. But other than that, everywhere else it looks like the lube is pretty evenly applied. It just seems to kind of pull down at the bottom here. One other thing that I wanted to note, again, when we're looking at the legs of the stem, They do look bigger. It does look larger than the V1. Not significantly, but you can see it does come out longer than the old one, and that may just be to kind of keep the same feel with the longer spring, but I thought it was interesting. And again, the sound test for these two. I'm just gonna put them up to my ears real quick. I can tell when I put them right next to my ears, this is definitely a lot crunchier. These I have not lubed or anything like that, but these do sound a lot better in my opinion. They don't have quite the same harsh clicking sound. It's almost like a bubbly click, as weird as that is to say. I'm not sure if that's because of the lube or the other differences on the housing or the change in the material, but overall I like that a lot. So I already have a keyboard that has box whites in it. I do not have one with box browns for V1s, unfortunately, but I will at least put the V2 in and try and do a side-to-side comparison with those. Additionally, I have, this is the Glaze Green, which is very similar to the box white. The main difference on this is they feel almost exactly the same. I do feel that they sound quieter than the V1. These have a brass leaf in it as opposed to, I forget what material it is in the V1, but it's not a brass one. So definitely makes a difference in sound.